You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.
All right, here we are, 11 o'clock. We are very excited for our next segment of the conference, which has been graciously sponsored by Tradier. And to help me introduce our keynote speaker, I would like to welcome to the stage Dan Radu, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Tradier.
No, don't get stressed, it's gonna get figured out. Oh, deep conversation that
Hello, everyone. You know, my daughter asked me to say this. The last thing I want is to stand in between you and a Navy SEAL commander. I'm going to get the heck out of here really quick. So anyway, I hope everyone is having a great time. We certainly are. My name is Dan Raju. I'm the CEO and the co-founders of Tradier. And I'm so excited that we have an opportunity to sponsor and be a part of this crowd. I'm very thankful to the OIC for inviting us, and happy to be a part of the keynote here, and to some extent, to a great extent. I've been here for 24 hours. I'm so excited to see so many Tradier partners, educators, platform providers, clearing firms, and also even the exchanges. Thank you so much. You guys do an amazing job letting us deliver a great product that we strive for every day. So thank you so much. For those of you who don't know who Tradier is, right? We are a very option-centric broker, a multi-asset broker, who basically is trying to serve an active options trader through technology. That's what we started a firm about 10 years ago. We've come a long way, and it's been a great journey the last couple of years, as many of the folks have said earlier on the call. The heart of what we try to do is a recognition of the fact that there is an active options trader in the market who has very specific needs as it pertains to content, as it pertains to education, as it pertains to platform choices and value. And we thought we could make a difference to that market. And so that was the heart of what we tried to deliver. We tried to deliver that through great platform choices and partnerships, and through our educational platform called The Hub. I know MyX and CBOE all have helped us a great extent to launch the platform, and I'm so excited to see so many educators who come and engage with us on the Hub. So what the Hub has basically taught us is that if you provide responsible and very meaningful education, there is a huge market for that. And I'm also realizing that so much of the growth of options that we see on the retail market today has been driven by what a tremendous job these educators do. So I think there's so many of them here. You guys do an amazing job. And so anyway, so that's Tradier for you. I'm so glad that you're having us a part of this event. And last thing is, once again, I'm going to repeat it. I'm not going to stand in between you and a Navy SEAL commander. I'm going to get killed. So thank you so much. Thank you very much, guys.
So I got to share a story before we dig into things. A week ago, I've got a speaking event out in New York City. And I'm flying New York back to San Diego for a follow-on event. The company's been good enough to put me up in the front of the plane. Life's good. I got my ticket, first class. I'm pathologically early to everything I do in the military, so I'm the first person in line. I'm ready to get on. And right before I get on, this flight attendant goes past me with a young kid, young line, I'd say 12 years old. They go on first. I come in onto the plane. He's got the middle seat. I walk up to my seat. I'm in the aisle. The flight attendant says, "Hey, are you sitting here?" I said, "I sure am." She said, "Hey, this is James. James is flying home unaccompanied to his family in San Diego. He's a delightful young man. Let me know if he needs anything. I said, sounds good. She takes off. I get settled. I put my hand out, say, how you doing, James? This kid gives me a vice-like grip, stares me dead in the eye, says, how are you, sir? I said, couldn't be better now that I'm sitting next to you, future of America. We get settled in. I love to read when I'm on a flight, so I break out a book. I'm sitting there, and I look down. James is reading as well. I kind of crane my neck down. I see James 12 is reading Neil deGrasse Tyson's Astrophysics for Ordinary People. It's like a little light reading today, James. He's like, no, I love science. I got this scholarship to come out and spend this weekend. I got to meet Tyson. It's just been an amazing weekend. I'm like, that's incredible. I've met him at an event, too. I've read that book. Could not be in a better mood for this flight. So the whole plane board's in full. Every seat taken except the one next to James and I. So 10 minutes or so after we're supposed to be pushing off, the captain comes up over the microphone's like, hey, we apologize. We've got this gazillion-mile member coming over from another flight. We got to get him on this flight. Give it a few minutes. No problem. Direct flight, life's good. You can tell 10, 15 minutes later, people are like getting annoyed. All of a sudden, we hear the footsteps of this gentleman coming down the jet bridge, and I cannot rectify the volume of the steps with a human being. Sounds like a water buffalo is coming down this jet bridge. He comes around the corner, does not disappoint. 6'5", 315 pounds, doesn't believe in deodorant. Steps over me, steps onto James's foot. James launches into orbit, crashes into the ground. He knocks James' book out of his hand. Now my attitude's shifting a little bit. He sits down, he kind of gets himself settled. I could tell James doesn't know what to do because the book is underneath this guy's feet. Guy kind of picks it up and looks at it, sort of throws it at James. Now my attitude's shifting precipitously. He says, he looks at James, he's like, what are you reading there, kid? He's like, oh, it's a book on physics. He's like, oh, what do you think, you're smart? Now I'm looking around first class, see if there's a federal air marshal on this plane. I'm like, I can put this guy to sleep before we take off. As it turned out, James needed no help whatsoever. He's like, I never really thought about how smart I am. I just love science. Big guy's not done. He's like, well, I can prove whether you're smart or not. Let's have a conversation. James looks him dead in the eye and says, great, sir, what subject would you like to talk about? Big guy's taken aback by his confidence. He's like, I don't know, kid, why don't we talk about nuclear power? James says, fascinating subject, would love to discuss that with you. I've got a question for you first. Horses, cows, deer, they all eat grass. One poops in big clumps, the second wet patties, the third tiny pellets. Why? The guy thinks about it for a second, says, geez, kid, I don't know. James 12, without skipping a beat, says, well, sir, do you really feel qualified to talk about nuclear power when you don't know shit? Yeah. Best flight of my life. You see a kid in the next 6 months, around 12, 13-year-olds named James, probably reading a book on science, you tell him Commander Denver says hello. You're in for a treat. Yeah, you're in for a treat. All right, so let me see if the slide, there we go. I know it says what this is. Does anybody know what the bell's for in SEAL training? You can just say it if you know what the bell's for. Tapping out, ringing out, yep. About 75 to 80% of the young lions that show up at SEAL training don't see the finish line. Almost all leave of their own volition. We don't drop that many people from training. The program is as hard as we've designed it to be, as hard as most people find it to be. And at some point, they say, I've never been this cold, wet, and miserable in my life. You guys are crazy. I'm out of here. So they got to go ring this bell 3 times. We took that tradition from the British Navy on how they passed information on ships. We don't do that to embarrass a young man. That's not what it's for. It's just to acknowledge this program is as hard as we need it to be. And it's time for you to move on from that journey or that adventure at that point in your life. If you're an officer, you only get one shot. If you ring that bell, you're never coming back. Enlisted guys, they ring that bell, they can go back to the regular Navy, come back, give it another shot, and some of them really do and come back and do a great job. What you can't see in this picture is when you ring that bell, you wear a helmet at all times in SEAL training. It's not for your protection. It's actually like your ID card. It's got your name on it. It's got your rank. Most importantly, it's got your class number. So we've been numbering SEAL training classes from the early 60s, class number 1, up through we're probably in the mid-400s at this point. But if you make it, if you see the finish line, that number is almost like your birthmark kind of into that warrior culture. So it's a special part of our program. I like explaining the quitting policy right at the beginning of my presentations so that you know it's in effect the whole time I'm up on stage right now. Like the quitting policy is active as I'm speaking. So if things get too challenging in the next 45 minutes, mentally, emotionally, physically, you can throw in the towel. We don't have a bell, so you gotta walk up here, bring like a cell phone and a pen. I'll lean the microphone down, you gotta tap it 3 times, it's gonna be embarrassing. You don't have helmets on, so you take off a single piece of clothing, and then you're free to go, yeah? All right, you're laughing now, see what happens. So people ask me all the time what I think separates SEALs from other operators on the battlefield. I love this question when it says what separates us from our enemies. That's a great conversation. When people are like, who do you think is the best in the U.S. military? I waste no time on it. Everyone I worked with in the military was off the charts good at their job. Sincerely, just unbelievable levels of capability across all the services. But the answer to the actual question of what separates us is the training. It's that training we use to select those young warriors into that culture, and then the advanced training we give them to make them, tough, capable, team-oriented, lethal if required, but really problem-solving operators on the battlefield. That's what we're looking for. So I've got a video that I'll play for you next. It shows some of our training, shows about the first 6 months. But my last job on active duty was running training for all the SEALs. So I wouldn't feel right if we watched a SEAL training video at a resting heart rate. So to that end, on your feet. Oh yeah, that's where people start grumbling. All right, now this is simple. I'm not gonna beat you up. We're gonna do one of the, well, by we I mean you. You're gonna do one of the exercises I used to put the young lions through in excess of 3,000 to 4,000 repetitions. I'm only gonna ask you to do it 3 times. Somewhere in the mid-2000s, people start speaking a foreign language. The reason I love this exercise is its simplicity. It's not even a jumping jack, it's just a jump in place, okay? But this is what I don't mean by a jump. Like that was embarrassing in this example. There's gotta be air under your feet, right? But we're gonna do it in a military fashion, so I'm gonna say ready, and then I'm gonna hear a loud ready. I'm gonna say ready, I'm gonna get a big boom and ready back. And then I'm gonna say up. When I say up, you're gonna jump, you're gonna land, you're gonna count off the repetition. So I'm gonna say up, you're gonna land, you're gonna count 1. When I say up again and you land, you're gonna count. Yeah, this is like a 10-minute conversation when I do this with medical. Yep, every time. Up one more time, when you land, you're gonna count 3. My only disclaimer of the day, you got a bad back, hips, knees, ankles, 7-inch stiletto heels are what you brought to the fight today, or your doc saw you on Monday and was like, Bob, everything's looking good. Only thing that's gonna throw you into cardiac arrest if you jump 3 times in the next week. Don't jump. All right. Ready. Up. 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 There are a couple failure to follow instructions. You know who you are, I'm not gonna point you out. Take seats, let's watch a little training. 4, That's about the first 6 months. Like I said, that's to find out if you're committed to the program. And if we can't make you quit in about that 6 months, then we're gonna find out if you're trainable. And really, I mentioned that, when I said that what separates us, that idea, that kind of concept, training, is one of my absolute favorite to talk about, right? Because this is the thing we utterly control. Like that alchemy of traits and genetics your parents passed on to you, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. I mean, they're working on it, but right now you're sort of fixed with that. But what we train to, what we discipline ourselves to, that's what or who we become, and that's utterly in our control. So I've got an example that helps illustrate a point I want to make about training and kind of this concept. I go to a lot of different events, a lot of different industries. I get asked to talk a lot about a bunch of different topics. But one that's consistent across almost every organization I've ever talked to is this idea of how do you constantly improve in the elite environment, right? How do you constantly get better when you're already performing at a very, very high level, which every great team does. And so I've got an example that helps kind of highlight this point. You don't need to get out of your seats this time, but I want everyone to, in your seats, put both hands over your head, kind of like a bank robber sticking you up. Yeah, both hands over your head. Awesome. Keep them there, keep them there. Now loosen up your back, roll your shoulders. I want everybody's hands as high as you can get them. Now we're talking. Perfect. Keep them there, keep them there. Now watch this. Everybody give me 1 more inch. Perfect. You can put them down. At some point, this is going to fail. I'm going to be teaching samurai, and I'm going to say, get your hands as high as you can get them. Give me another inch. They're not, and it's going to be an awkward moment in my teaching career. So far, I'm batting 1,000. Whether it's a group of 10 or 5,000, I've never had a group that didn't find another inch. I know this sounds ridiculously simplistic. I sincerely believe this is your opportunity to constantly improve in the elite environment. I'm for the big idea. If you've got the big idea that's going to change the industry or some project you're working on or the direction you're going, don't keep that to yourself. Definitely push that forward. Let the team kind of beat it up, take a look at it, and see if that's going to do what you think it's going to do. Rarely have I seen big ideas create constant improvement. It's small measures of getting better at every opportunity you can find them. And you gotta figure this out. I used to beat this like a drum to my assault teams. I'm like, we have to find an inch, we have to find an inch. It'd make my teammates nuts. 6-8 months later, one of my guys would come up and say, I found an inch. I think if we change this, optic on our weapon system, we're gonna shoot more accurately. I think we put this different gas oil mixture in our boats, we're going faster. We take this piece of gear off our parachute equipment, we're gonna land on target better. Find that inch, you're gonna constantly improve in the elite environment. And you need to figure out how often you can do that. I don't know if that's weekly, monthly, quarterly, but even annually. If you came back to this meeting next year and said, we tangibly moved something we were doing an inch, you're gonna get better. All right, I have all kinds of stories I like to tell in this section. I usually kind of cherry pick them depending on what I talk about with the leadership team or the folks leading up to an event. And one that struck me that I haven't told all that often, but I do think it'll be good for this group is, when I got out to my second SEAL team, so you move from team to team throughout your career at some point. When I got to my second SEAL team, it was an anniversary year for that team. It was like a 40-year anniversary year. And of course, they task all the junior people of that team to kind of put on an event to celebrate that. So I did a little bit of history. I was looking through some of the history of the SEAL teams to do a quick synopsis of things. And I found an interesting story that came out of that. JFK actually called for the establishment of the SEAL teams. That's the genesis of how the teams became what they were, is JFK called for this maritime force that could come from ships in the sea and attack targets within littoral regions and so on and so forth. I don't think there's any way he could have guessed what it would grow into, but that was the impetus for the SEAL teams. And then as I was kind of reading through that, I found out another story from JFK that never left me. It was so interesting. When he was elected president, he told the world, he announced to the world, we're going to put a man on the moon, right? We're going to put a man on the moon within a decade. We're going to get this done. He said that having never visited NASA or any of the engineers or people that were going to do that. And once he got elected, he's like, I better do that. So he goes and visits NASA. And as he describes the trip, when he shows up there at NASA headquarters, he gets brought in this beautiful room with screens and monitors and all this stuff. And basically the smartest people in the room are giving him a brief on how they're going to chuck somebody into space, right? It's astrophysicists and mathematicians, basically the smartest people in the country, are all in this room brief him. He's very impressed by the brief. He loved it. But when he finished that brief, whoever was running the actual visit said, hey, sir, Mr. President, we actually want to walk you down to where we're building the training facilities that will train the astronauts and get them ready for the rigors of doing this and getting it done. We'd like you to walk out there. He says, great. As the president describes it in this story, he comes out of this briefing room and he's looking at a long hallway, like a 100-yard long hallway with kind of a marble floor. And as he kind of states it, it was the most beautifully polished, perfectly kept floor he'd ever seen. There wasn't anything in the White House that was as beautifully polished and set that he'd ever seen or walked across. And it really meant something to him. He's walking down this hall. He's kind of overwhelmed by this. And about 3/4 away down this hallway, the janitor is out there kind of mopping the floor. I'm sure NASA leadership is like, how do we allow this to happen? We got somebody cleaning the floor as the president's going by. Too late now. He, of course, stops and starts chatting with the janitor. They're going back and forth. And very quickly asks the janitor, what is your job here at NASA? as if it wasn't obvious. But the janitor's answer is the thing that struck the president the most from the trip. The janitor said, without skipping a beat, Mr. President, my job is to put a man on the moon. It's the number one thing he took away from that visit. Not the math, not the science, not the tech that was going to get it done. He said, if the janitor knows what we're here to do, we're going to win this race, no doubt about it. I tell this story because it really makes me think of some of the things we very much had to look at in the SEAL teams, and I think every organization need to look at, both at an individual level and a leadership level. It's this idea of doing the tactical very well, doing your job well. That you have to get good at, proficient at, and do in an exceptional way. But you can't do that and lose sight of the strategic vision, right? The long-range goal or what you're trying to achieve. If you can build in yourself or in your teams tactical proficiency, right? Most beautiful floor you'd ever seen, but then a vision of what you're trying to achieve, those are unstoppable teams. Those are unstoppable teams. Keep those in mind. Tactical, do that well. Keep your focus on the strategic. Stand by for what happens next. All right, hoo-yah. This is the SEAL battle cry. So for centuries, warrior cultures have had some word they use to fire themselves up and cheer and run across the battlefield to face their nation's enemies. In the SEAL teams, it's hoo-yah. The thing that's interesting about this is across all the U.S. military services, everybody has the exact same word. It just sounds totally different depending what service you're in. Anyone that serves knows what I'm talking about. In the Army, it's as if the only place they recruit people from is the Deep South. Apparently, that's the only place they get people in the Army. Sounds like this. Who, Sergeant, who? That's what it sounds like in the Army. If there are any Marines in the room, give me a devil dog bark. Sounds like that, spelled like that. By far the best version. If there are 4 of them in here, it'd like go into like barking off the wall. It'd be a full howl. We'd be here for a minute. It's by far the coolest version, no question in my mind. Makes me think SEALs are the most literal people on the battlefield because that says hoo-yah and we say hoo-yah, but I digress. This word really makes me think about the culture of the SEAL teams. And I think culture is honestly what it's all about. I mean, if you have a good culture in an organization, a team, a project, that team, that project's gonna fly. If your culture is toxic or not supportive of one another, you're in big, big trouble no matter what you're trying to do. The SEAL teams have an amazing culture. It's something that we drive into the students from day one, usually with a tremendous amount of sand, concrete, cold water, and pain. But consequently, that team becomes very tight and is able to do special things on the battlefield. As I described earlier, 75 to 80% of the people don't make it. Every day of SEAL training is hard. Literally every day is hard. You're cold, wet, sandy, and miserable, just beat down the entire time. But there is one week that sort of rules them all. If you've read anything about the SEAL teams or about SEALs, it's called Hell Week. So you've already been at the program for probably 2.5 months. You're beat up, you're scraped, you're bloody, you've got chafing around your belt line, between your legs, like stress fractures. I mean, it's ridiculous how hurting you are before you get to Hell Week, and then they throw this thing at you. So you probably had 100 some odd people in your class already quit, and then this week shows up. You know when it's coming, it's not a surprise, so it starts on a Sunday night, ends on Friday. The whole week you're with your boat crew. You saw in the video earlier with us running with the boats on your head and paddling through the surf. That's your family as you go through Hell Week. Again, starts Sunday night. You go on a 24-hour clock. There's 3 rounds of instructors, shifts of instructors that run that clock. You do not sleep from Sunday night until Wednesday morning sometimes, 0 sleep. Get maybe an hour-and-a-half nap on Wednesday. If you knew what you were going to feel like after that nap, you would have skipped it. Thursday, you get another nap. Hopefully on Friday, you see the finish line. That's Hell Week. At the end of every day, right before the sun goes down, that is the only time in Hell Week you're comfortable, because at the end of every day, right when the day shift of instructors is given way to the first shift of night instructors, which is where we put all our like bipolar, insane instructors on the night shift because it's scarier. They march you into medical. So we got this great medical facility to make sure everything's taken care of. So you literally walk into medical, you strip all your clothes off to the day you were born, you go walking up to a doctor, they look you up and down, check you out, make sure you don't have any injuries, infections, cuts, abrasions, whatever it might be. And when they give you an up check, you get to walk out the other side of medical, and the class that is junior to you, okay, the class that's gonna go into Hell Week next, they have taken your clothes from the day before, washed, dried them, and put them in a pile. So you get to put on a dry, warm pair of underwear, pants, t-shirt, blouse. I wish I could plug you in to how good this clothing feels for the 30 seconds you're gonna be in it before you go back to Pacific Ocean. You'd sell a family member for 5 more minutes in this clothing. That's how good it feels, okay? So I think it's Wednesday, somewhere around there. I'm the last person coming out of medical. I got something going on my knee. Great, they clear me. I go running back out. And as I'm heading towards the surf, I see that the whole class is standing around the boats and nobody's wet, it was always like a 3-ring circus by the time you get out there. And I was like, man, I go run over my boat. I was like, what's going on? They're like, we don't know, sir, but it's not good. Like, there's no way this is gonna work out on our behalf. So the nighttime and daytime instructors are doing their turnover. We're all waiting for our fate around the boat. I've got to explain the composition of my boat because you understand the story better. You have 7 people in the boat. So you got 3 paddlers on the right side of the boat, you got 3 paddlers on the left side of the boat, and then you've got an officer or a senior enlisted, that's the boat crew leader. He's in the back of the boat steering, calling cadence, making decisions on how you're gonna win races and do the things you do. By far, the 2 most important people on your boat are the number 1 paddler up right and the number 1 paddler up on the left. Anyone that's gone whitewater rafting knows what I'm talking about. They're gonna set the tone and the rhythm of that boat and how they pull together. They're gonna have the cadence and the drive to get you to move forward. You're going up an 8-foot wave out in the ocean. They're gonna be the 2 that either dig their paddles and pull you over the top or don't. You need your studs up front. I had that. They just could not be any more polar opposite human beings. My number 1 man on the left, we called Brooklyn, because he'd grown up in New York City, and he was like straight out of a sitcom of like your classic New Yorker, right? Great accent, always in your face, cutting it up, making jokes, keeping spirits high. That was Brooklyn. My number 1 paddler on the right, we called Louisiana, because he'd grown up in some backwater bayou in Louisiana and was the most quiet, circumspect human being I had ever met in my entire life. I had never heard Louisiana in the 2.5 months we'd been together say more than a single word response in any conversation the entire time I'd known him. Yes, no, maybe, dumb. That was the most I'd ever heard Louisiana say, okay, up to this point. We're waiting for the instructors to come up with a plan. Brooklyn's doing his thing. He's like, you know, every beach on planet Earth, those little sandpiper birds that run up and down the coast in the surf, everybody's seen these birds. Brooklyn's like, sir, look at these stupid birds. I swear to God, if I die this week, I'll probably reincarnate as one of these birds, have to run in and out of the surf the rest of my life. He's losing his mind about these birds. All of a sudden, the instructors figure they're out. They're like, hey, we want to do a bet, which means us against the instructor staff. Now, that never works out for the students, but they're honorable about it. So like, we need to do a bet. You guys got to come up with something creative. And they were very specific about this. They're like, look, we want 3 bets, the best one we're going to pick, and it's got to be something different. It can't be the normal, feats of strength or holding your breath or swimming underwater. It's got to be something cool, something unique, right? So all the boats kind of come together. Oh, here's the stakes. They said, and if you win, and they're honorable about this, whatever the bet is set for, if you win, you get to stay dry until the sun breaks the horizon, which is probably 20 minutes of sunlight left. Mind-boggling stakes. So all the boats come together, making a plan. Brooklyn's doing his regular thing. He's like, sir, I think if we take 2 telephone poles and tie some life preservers around it, we can create a bridge. Not a bad idea. And then all of a sudden, Louisiana says, sir, I have a bet. Now that's 4 more words than I ever heard Louisiana say. So I was like, everybody shut up. I was like, what do you got? He says, sir, I talk bird. I said, you got to repeat that. He said, I talk bird. And I was like, shit, that's what I thought you said. I don't know what that means. He said, well, sir, have you ever been duck hunting? I was like, nope, grew up in the Bay Area, California, not a lot of duck hunting. As it turns out, there's a lot of duck hunting out there. I just didn't know that because my dad wasn't a duck hunter. He's like, well, when you go duck hunting, you get out in a rice field or a slough or a body of water, get all camouflaged up, you throw out a bunch of decoys, then you start calling ducks in. You do a bunch of calling, they fly in, and you shoot them. I was like, I got you. He's like, well, I'm a junior Louisiana State duck calling champion. I said, okay. He's like, well, it's February, and we're in the Pacific Flyway, which means every duck from the Aleutians and the Bering Sea is flying south for the winter. I was like, I went to kindergarten, I remember. And I looked up, and sure enough, ducks are flying left on the coast of California. He's like, I'm pretty sure I can get this whole beach set up, and we get everything quiet, and I can call some ducks to come in here and land on that little pond behind us. At all times in the winter at SEAL Train, our obstacle course has a little depression in this corner where apparently it never drains. If it's rained or there's been big surf, there's like a little 1-acre pond that just sits there. It's like, I'm pretty sure I can call ducks in to fly into this pond. And I said, this is the worst idea I ever heard. but we don't have anything better, so we offer that up. And you can imagine what the instructors pick. So I was like, of course. I go walking back, I'm like, they picked the bird thing. All of a sudden, Louisiana turns into the most vocal, capable, focused leader I've ever seen in my entire life. Like if Patton had been standing next to him, he'd been like, okay, you're in charge, got it. He turns the whole class, and I needed every single boat turned upside down, parallel to the beach, every student under a boat so no duck can see a human head on this beach. Turns to the SEAL instructor staff, he's like, I need all you gentlemen over the berm, lying prone, so nobody can see you. You can tell the instructor's like, is he talking to us right now? We could murder him without penalty. And I was like, be careful. He's like, you come with me, sir. I get up on the berm, we lay down. Everything's quiet. Sure enough, ducks are flying past. And he starts quacking. Quack, 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 making all these duck noises. I was like, this is the end of my leadership journey, right here. I mean, at a minimum, I take a nickname into the next 20 years of my career for saying yes to this idea. He's quacking, no ducks are moving, all over the place, everything's getting chaotic, but the students are staying still, the instructors are staying still. We're probably 4 minutes in, I look over the instructors, they're like, this was your idea? Like, I was like, I don't know what to tell you. I turned to him, I was like, hey man, you gotta make something happen. He's like, no, I'm just getting my rhythm down. He's like, you see this V squadron of greenheads about 100 yards off the beach? I was like, I don't even know what a greenhead is. And he's like, those ducks. I was like, mallards? He's like, yeah, I was like, we call them mallards. Like, we call them greenheads. I'm like, fair enough. Here they come, he's calling. I kid you not, all 8 of these ducks get like 40 yards in front of us. He changes like the rhythm of the call and like the cadence of the call. I kid you not, all 8 of these birds set their wings, fly directly overhead, and land on the pond behind us. It was like Rudy just made that final tackle at Notre Dame, right? The whole class has him up on their shoulders, is losing their mind, screaming, cheering, patting him on his back. SEAL instructors are running over the berm like, that's the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life. You're gonna be in charge of the Navy someday. I have a daughter I'm gonna introduce you to. I'm walking around, I'm like, I told you he talks bird. I said this from the beginning. I don't know why anybody doubted me trying to salvage my leadership reputation. I tell this story for a couple reasons. One, I just really like telling that story. 2, I learned 2 valuable pieces of information in that moment that carried me very well for the rest of my career. Probably better than anything anybody ever taught me about leadership. This is what I learned. The first was, here was this team, this group of 6 other teammates of mine that I thought I knew back to front intimately well from the time we'd shared together. And here's one of my teammates with a superpower, a skill that I knew nothing about. And it occurred to me that if that was what happened on my team, if I didn't know what the talents were, what some special skill was, I'd be missing opportunities. So for the rest of my career, it didn't matter if you were a SEAL, in our admin department, HR, medical, whatever it is, I tried to get to know people. And if I could figure out a way to tease out like your hidden talent or some special skill, and then I could apply that to a job, I would create an instant superstar. I mean, I don't know what you're gonna do with duck calling, but I'd find out one of my teammates had a proclivity towards language, they'd go to language school. Find out one of them was good with video games and computers, they'd go learn to fly drones. If you find your team's hidden talents and apply it to a job, watch what happens, watch what happens. That was point 1, to learn my team, to get to know my troops. The second, which was equally and maybe more important, was to take risk on my teammates' ideas, was to really listen to the team's ideas and take risk on that. What I found in doing so was that rarely did I have the best idea in the room. Almost always one of my teammates had a better idea or an equal idea we should try. And when I'd go with that idea, or we'd go to marinate that or to see what it'd do and flourish, the connection I'd have with the person and that they knew they were heard and listened to and their opinion was valued just upped the level of the team. And then the secret of that is when you go with one of those ideas, if it succeeds, you push all the credit to that teammate. I mean, write them an award for that idea. If it fails, you take all the blame, as if they never said a word. You do that, your people will follow you to the end of the earth. I guarantee you. Find your team's hidden talents, take risk on your teammates. I guarantee you they won't disappoint you. Very rarely, very rarely. All right, people ask me all the time, what's the number one thing I learned in SEAL training? This is who wins. That used to just happen on a regular Tuesday in my last life, and I can't start flying first class to swank resorts and get soft. So I just put that in there for myself. I don't have a single teaching point off that slide. That's just for me. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, what's the number one thing I learned in SEAL training? So about a month before you graduate from the basic course of instruction out in San Diego, they send you out to San Clemente Island, right? So the class has gone from like 180 down to 20 some odd candidates, and they send you out to San Clemente Island, one of the Channel Islands off the southern coast of California. Now, if anyone's been out to Catalina Island, taking a boat or the ferry out there, that is not what San Clemente Island is. That place has like mountain bike trails, mini golf courses, drinks with umbrellas. San Clemente Island is like the land of the lost. I mean, it is like a cactus, windswept nightmare of an island. You come down to the beach in the morning, there'll be a sea lion there that got bit in half by one of the sharks that live off the coast. You come around the corner, if you saw a Tyrannosaurus Rex stand there, you'd be like, of course the thing lives here. We're going this way, right? It's a primal place. But you get out there and you get to learn all the cool stuff. Demolition, hand-to-hand fighting, shooting, all that stuff takes place. And then the last week, the instructors give you what's called an FTX, a final training exercise. It's like a final exam. They give you a mission. You've got to plan that mission, brief it to the instructors, rehearse and execute it, all under the watchful eye of lunatic SEAL instructors you think have been trying to murder you for the last 6 months. So in the world of tests, it's a relatively intense test. We've finished briefing, approved, we're in rehearsals, getting ready to do this mission, and we are behind on the timeline. My job, there's one officer that's senior to me in the class, so he's the class leader. I'm kind of second in command. Besides running what my squad's gonna do on the actual mission, my job is to call out the time hack. So in the military, we brief a timeline to everything we do for every mission, and the instructors have that timeline. And at a basic training command, there's almost nothing worse you can fail than being late or missing a timeline. Armageddon if you miss one of those. Because on the actual battlefield, if you say you're gonna be somewhere, you better be there when you say you're gonna be there. So we're behind by about 20 minutes. Now the senior officer, it's his job to kind of get that together. So I'm just calling out, it's 2000, it's 2015, it's 2030, like trying to get us caught up the timeline. He finally figures it out and starts running around this compound like a lunatic, trying to get us caught up the timeline because he can tell we're behind. We got the gun trucks ready, everybody got the nav plan set, everybody got enough ammunition, let's get down to the boats. He's losing his mind. And I'm thinking to myself as he's doing, I'm like, this is not good. This is not good leadership-wise. No sooner does that thought cross my mind, but a Master Chief Petty Officer, the senior ranking listed SEAL instructor, comes walking on this balcony overlooking where this chaos is unfolding. He's like, hey, all the officers, post, which means to come to him. 5 officers left the class. He's like, come over here, take a knee. Literally take a knee because he's gonna start preaching. Now, I don't know how many people know the ranks of the United States Navy, but a Master Chief Petty Officer is the senior ranking person in the United States Navy. You can go no further. And a Master Chief Petty Officer SEAL at a basic training command lives right about here compared to God. Master Chief Petty Officer, God, rest the senior leadership, right? He draws tremendous water to basic training command. This Master Chief looked like Hollywood had cast him to be a SEAL Master Chief, right? 6'3", nothing but tan skin, bone gristle, scars all over him, deep gray gunfighter eyes, Magnum PI mustache, the original reflective Oakley sunglasses from back in the day. Anybody that played football from like the 70s to 90s will know what I'm talking about. Remember those like Russell Wilson football coaching shorts that were significantly too high and tight? Yeah. Cool at the time, freaks me out now when I think about it. It's like, take a knee, so we all come running over. I remember 5 officers left the class. I'm trying to get in the middle because I forgot to mention one thing about this Master Chief costume. At all times in training, this Master Chief wore on his back a 2-handed broadsword. Like out of Braveheart. This is not a modern weapon. So I'm trying to get in the middle because I'm like, I don't think he's gonna knight us. I figure if he swung that thing, he'd decapitate my swim buddy. I catch a glancing blow on my face. I start with a scar. It's my whole thought process. I'm taking a knee. I get down on knees, like, let me tell you something, gents. Let me tell you something. As officers, the only thing we need you to do is lead. You're gonna get to jump out of planes, blow things up, shoot over a mile. That isn't your job. Your job is to set the expectations, manage the chaos, and be the example for the troops to follow. He said, because what you're gonna find is at a minimum, the troops are gonna mimic your behavior. In this organization, because of their intensity, they're probably gonna amplify your behavior. So if you keep it together, they'll keep it together. And if you lose it, I guarantee you they're gonna lose it too. He says, prepare to copy, which means to take notes. Everybody breaks out a pencil and paper. He's like, I want to share something with you that a Master Chief from Vietnam shared with me. Number one thing I learned in SEAL training. So we're ready for the goal, whatever he's going to say next. And this is all he said to us. Calm is contagious. Calm is contagious. He says, beat it, which means to run. And I remember as I'm running, I hear him in the background say, because in our line of work, gents, if you keep your head, you keep your head, which was an awesome explanation point to the calm is contagious line. Cool thing is, in 2 decades of sustained combat, I never saw this proven false. I never saw a mission going so well that if the leadership kind of got shaky or lost their head, it didn't go off the tracks. And I never saw a mission going off the tracks, of which I saw many, that if the leadership kept their head, it didn't at least not get any worse and almost instantly get better. It is a superpower to stay cool and collected when other people are losing around you, particularly if you're in charge. I've got a video I'm going to play for you next, and then we're going to wrap things up. We made this movie a few years ago called Act of Valor. Everybody in the movie that was in the military was actually on orders on active duty to go make this movie. We thought it was going to be at like the bottom of a Walmart DVD bin, never see the light of day, and next thing you know, it's on a big screen and like the #1 movie in America. But my buddies and I are rescuing this CIA operative in this scene. We used live fire ammunition in this scene. They hadn't done that in Hollywood since like the 60s or something like that. And so we had a bunch of ammunition. We're like, we could burn it if you want to ruin some cameras. They're like, let's do it. So you're going to hear my buddies and I yelling at each other. That's just because bullets are super loud and guns are loud and we had to hear each other. You're not going to see anybody lose their head. All right, this is my calm is contagious video.
Sir, what's the status on those boats? I lost whiplash on the run. Told them you hit the target early. They're coming in hot.
I got no boat.
Contact rear! Contact rear! Pick it up, pick it up!
Stay down, brother. Calm. Be easy.
Sir, keep down! Keep down! Calm down, brother. Mikey's up, man. Mikey's up.
Stay down, brother. Calm. Be easy. We're almost out of here. We're almost out of here.
AJ! You are us coming up the rear! Whiplash! Whiplash! Secondary extract is burnt. Moving to tertiary extract. I have 8 packs. 7 Sierras, 1 package. Package with multiple wounds. The Sierra has gunshot wound to the head. This will be a hot extract. Water! 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 Going in, going in! I got her, I got her.
Calm is contagious. When we filmed that scene, none of us ever filmed anything in our lives. And if you've ever done any of that, you got to film every scene like 10 times. You got to get a bunch of different takes so they get it right. So we're on the edge of this river, getting ready to swim out to these boats. Now remember, this guy comes walking up next to us. He's not a young man, but he's got the camera that's kind of in that big water bubble thing like you see on Shark Week. He comes up to me. He's like, hey, I'm going to be in the water with you, getting all the scenes from in the water. I was like, sounds good. And he's like, you're in charge? I was like, I am. He's like, can I ask you a question? I was like, you bet. He said, so they're going to be shooting real bullets at us? I was like, well, not at us, above us. He's like, you're okay with that? I was like, they haven't hit us yet. We'll see what happens. And so we go out there and film that scene. Then we get reset. Everybody's back on the river edge. We're getting ready to swim back out. We're like, man, that guy must be like reloading his camera. Where is that dude? And all of a sudden, like we see him across the river with a telephoto lens like this big. He's like, I got all the footage I need in the first round. He wanted nothing to do with going back out of that water. If you could bring that slide back up. I'm terrible about at self-promotional type stuff, but my bride helped put this together for me. If you text ever onward to that number, you can sign up for something I call my Commander's Coffee. So once a month, I release a video, no more than 2. I will not crush your inbox with every Tuesday white noise emails or offers or things like that. I put a video out on a current event, a topic, something I learned about leadership or human performance or something I learned from my daughters. I just have to say it because, like I said, my bride put that together. If I don't say it, she's going to shoot me. I taught her how to shoot, so she's probably going to hit me. All right, cool. So the very first time I did one of these speaking events, I was trying to figure out how do you close, right? How do you stick the landing at the end of a presentation? My thought was to tell a joke because it's very, very hard to beat laughter. Not like a knock-knock joke, you know what I'm saying? Plant a seed early in the presentation, you got the punchline, drop the mic, walk out of it. That was my plan. And then right before I'm going up on stage, my cell phone chimes. And I was like, oh man, I got to make a discipline to turn my cell phone off and not have that bother me. But I look down, because I've got a couple minutes, and I see that it's an overseas number, which is not uncommon to have a teammate reach out to you and they need something downrange. There's nothing better than when somebody calls and is like, hey, we need protein powder, shoelaces, body armor, weights, Copenhagen, whatever they need. There's nothing better than to send a teammate something they need in an austere location. Every once in a while, it's to pass tough information. And I look down, I see on my phone that one of my buddies had sent me this text saying 2 of our teammates had been killed 2 nights before in Afghanistan. Very, very sobering to get this text right before I'm going up on stage. One of those teammates, his bride and their 3 kiddos live right next to my bride and us, so we'd had dinner with her and their kids the night he was killed, just didn't know it at the time. The other of those 2 was the number 2 paddler behind Louisiana and my boat crew in basic training. Very, very tough to get this text right as I'm going up on stage. However, it did make me kind of rethink how I wanted to close, and so I've never closed in another way. This is what it made me think of. There's really only 2 reasons you'll ever see SEALs off base in uniform. One's to attend a wedding, which is an awesome reason to be off base and celebrate that moment with your teammate, his bride, and that commitment that only makes us a bigger family. The other's to attend a funeral. And I stopped counting funerals at 40. When I've been to my 40th teammate's funeral, I stopped counting. I've probably been to double in my career. However, I have never been off base in uniform and not had people almost bruise my back, patting me on it, thanking me for my service. It has been an otherworldly time to serve in this military. I mean, it was not that many wars ago that our troops came back to a radically different reception, which is a breach of a national trust I can't even wrap my head around. But the support for the troops in this era was just otherworldly. And I can't tell you how much it meant to go do that job and to have that support. So I feel like every time I've got a microphone, I have an opportunity to return the favor. So I say this very, very sincerely. I thank all of you for your service. I thank all of you for giving us something to go fight for. I've been to almost every ugly corner of the world you can be in. And the experiment we enjoy here, I've never seen anything that even approaches it. I mean, there's no way the founders could have thought of how good this would get and how great it would become. And the only way we're going to ruin it is we're going to do it to ourselves, which we might be trying to do. But I think we can keep it together if we make some good decisions. So I thank all of you for your service. If I can be service to any of you moving forward, please call on me. And I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much for having me today. Yeah, thank you.
Watch how I do it. That's the way I do it. That's the way I do it. Watch how I do it. That's the way I do it. That's the way I do it.
Do you want to do Q&A?
Well, they said they've got, the best thing about these events is there's a countdown clock, which in my last life meant the room was going to blow up. So we got like, the bomb tech would go over there, cut the red or yellow wire, we'd stand on the corner. So we do have 15 minutes left. They asked if I'd do some Q&A. If I can answer questions, I'm happy to do it. If you got to run to the bathroom, you won't hurt my feelings, or we will just stare at each other awkwardly for the next 15 minutes. I think they got microphones, or I'll repeat a question if you got one. And if not, we'll get you out of here. Please.
No, I'm just curious, like, with that basic training, like that's like 6 months in that video. Like, what's a regular day like? One day, like just.
One day at that training?
Yeah, like does it start with like calisthenics? Does it start with something? Like, how does it start and how does it finish?
Yeah. So how does a day of basic training start and how does it finish if that's 6 months? I remember 5 or 6 years after I graduated, I was at a SEAL team. That class leader that I graduated with, he was the only one that had the class schedule for like the instructor was giving him just for the day of what was going on. But he had saved some of those and we looked at it. I literally couldn't believe it was real. I mean, it was, up at like you started at 5, so you're up earlier than that to drag a razor across your face and be ready to go. And then it'd be like, a 2-mile time run on the beach, faster you can go in boots and pants. You come back from that, you do 2.5 hours of push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, rope climbs, run on the beach, wet and sandy the whole time. Then you'd run to the chow hall, eat breakfast, you'd come back, you'd do boat evolutions, paddling through the surf for 4.5 hours, and somebody'd get their teeth knocked out and head to medical. Then you'd come back in for that, run to lunch. Going to lunch was basically a 1.5-mile run. So 3 miles every day just to go to chow. Then you'd come back, maybe do a conditioning one with the instructor, which is just soft sand boots, run to Mexico and back. And then maybe you had an O course that night. Then you go to bed. Yeah, it was ridiculous. I mean, it was ridiculous. The funny thing is, the people that are made to do that job, like, just have fun. Like, I just remember being fun. I felt like I got there and was like, this is where I want to be. You know, my class started with 180, and we graduated 22, and I think 21 of those people knew they were going to be there on that Friday. One was probably like, holy shit, I made it. Like, I got to call mom. You know, like, I'm calling mom right now to tell her, you're not going to believe this. But most people that get there, they want to be there and do that. Yeah. Please.
Are you able to tell us about one of your missions that you were proud of?
Yeah, I'll repeat it if you don't get there with the microphone. Yeah, am I able to tell you about one of my missions that I'm proud of? Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about missions, everybody thinks everything we do is secret. Some of the, the intel and the things that lead to missions, we keep that secret and how we do that. A lot of the missions themselves are not as secretive. I mean, I have a lot of missions rattling around in my head. I do remember we had a Marine unit in Iraq in 2006 that was one of our sister units, and they had a corpsman, so one of their medics that was like 19. I mean, it looked like he needed a note from mom to be in the military. Just the sweetest kid ever, and he got killed by a sniper team that was working in that area, and it just, it crushed this Marine unit. I've never seen a unit go from high spirit to like in the dumps ever on a battlefield because of his loss, and I totally get it. And so we got assigned to help them to hunt this kind of sniper cell. There were 8 bad guys, 8 shooters in that cell. We'd killed 7 of them over about 2.5 months. Then we finally found the leader of this cell, the guy that was the top guy. And I remember we get clearance to go hit this target where he think he was staying at night. And based on some of the rules and what we had set in place, the Marines couldn't go with us on that mission. They often could. They just couldn't that night because some other intel we needed to run and figure out. But I remember calling the Marine major who was in charge of that young man. He's the one that's going to go tell his parents and do the toughest part of that job. And we invited him on that mission. And we got that guy. He was with us, and just seeing his face, like, and what he was going to be able to go back to his team and kind of tell them that they'd sort of, balance the scales was something I'll never forget. Just very, very special to see their kind of, down in the dumps and then come to a high level. So yeah, super proud of that one. We did a couple rescue missions that were not super high profile, but you got somebody that was in a bad spot out of a bad spot. That's about as good as it gets because you know what could happen to them in an orange jumpsuit over there. So those were pretty cool. Yeah, it's just unbelievable amounts of time that our teams did incredible things. It was really, more than any specific mission, I just missed the like overall competency and excellence of my teammates. Everything that they did was just mind-boggling. I mean, the hardest question I ever get at one of these events is somebody's like, how do you motivate a team? I'm like, I have no idea. Like, all I had to do was pull the reins back on my team. I never had to crack a whip. Just super motivated, sharp, capable people doing that job. But I'll never forget that mission, just balancing the scales a little bit. Yeah. Please. What helps you stay calm when it gets tough? Calm is contagious. Yeah, I think training. I mean, I talked about it right at the beginning. I could do the whole presentation on training, and none of that would be wasted. We just did so many reps preparing for the mission we'd see on the battlefield, and we did it at such a high level of intensity. I mean, we lose people in training every couple years. Like somebody will die in training just because we go so hard in training. I'm not saying that as a goal to reach, but we push it so hard that when you actually get to the battlefield, I never was scratching my head wondering what to do. We just work on problem solving. We have tons of events in training. If I were to run training, like if you did a training with one of your teams, I'd run trainings that are built to fail. I'd make it fail and then see how people react and how they respond and how they come back from that and handle and metabolize that. I didn't have a hard time. I didn't feel like I had to throttle or do anything different to be calm. I also knew through that practice that getting all fired up and emotional did not help. So if you could just stay calm. If you ever talk to jet pilots, like if you hear jet pilots or police that are in a chase, like if somebody on the radio in that situation is kind of yelling or extreme, they'll ask them to back off. Like you'll just hear pilots like as their planes crash and they'll be like, well, we're getting real close to the mountain. I'm trying to pull up. It is what it is. We're going into the mountain. And that's what their voice will be like. Because look, if they're freaking out screaming, they're definitely hitting the mountain. So I think it's just recognizing that it's not going to help you if you lose it, and practice as much as you can so you can hit curveballs. Yeah. Yep. Please. Was there any part of your training that you dreaded more than the other? Like some people hit you in the water? Yeah, anything I dreaded in training more than anything other. I have a learning disability in math. We had to do dive calculations for doing our dive qualifications. I swear I was like, I'm gonna go out of SEAL training because of a math quiz. And that was very disruptive to my spirit, but I figured out a way to pass it. And you mentioned jumping out of planes. I hated jumping out of planes. I thought it was the dumbest thing we'd ever done, you know? I was just like, this plane is flying, fine. And then you'd go jumping out of it, and then you'd be like, well, when my chute opened, I was like super excited. But if it didn't, I was like, I'm gonna have the rest of my short life to scream at myself for jumping out of this plane before. And I got 300 plus jumps, but it just, I didn't like one of them. Until I saw that silk above my head, and then I was happy about it. Yeah. Please. You're welcome. Yeah.
One question I have for you is a lot of times with athletes, they spend their entire life training, developing the skills to get good at what they're doing.
Yeah.
At a certain point, they age out that sport that they want to do. Does that happen with Navy SEALs as well? That it's more of a calling, and their bodies break down and they can't do it anymore, and you have that life cycle?
Sure. So the question, if you didn't hear, was athletes train their whole life and then they kind of age out of their capacity to play at a high level and do it, and does that happen in the SEAL teams? It does. The career path takes care of it as much as anything. So I was an officer going through, so I started as an officer, I retired as an officer. I'd say as an officer, you have about 10, no more than 12 years of kind of operational time, and usually even shorter than that to when you're actually going to be running assault teams, attacking targets, and doing the job you really came to do, or at least you were excited to do. You'll promote out of that to where you got to just start doing the administrative and strategic and all that good stuff. Enlisted guys, you could do 3 or 4 platoons. If they end up at SEAL Team 6, which is our all-star team, there's guys there that have been going hard for 25 years. There's senior chiefs and master chiefs still hitting targets over there. But that's the all-star team. So the people that end up there are the mutants, right? The fittest, the toughest, the most get after. All our guys are tough, but every group has their top guy and their bottom guy, and somewhere in there are the folks that can do it for a long time. I've got a young guy's going through training right now. I'm real good friends with his dad. I mentored him a bit going in, and he has, as best I can tell, all the goods, right? He's got the mindset, physically strong and all this stuff, and he's getting sick right now. You can get this, it's called SITE, swimmer-induced pulmonary edema, where you get water in your lungs. And it's killing me because I don't have the heart to tell his dad that it's rare that you get that and come back. He can come back, but he's probably gonna get it again. I just run and train and I know it. No, it's killing me right now. Hopefully, he gets a gift and somehow that rectifies itself. But that's the toughest thing, is to see somebody that has the mindset and the heart and their body fails them. So I was never, I played an elite level of sports, but I think my body could just take damage. So when I went through, I didn't take a lot of hits. I haven't had surgeries or anything. I just came out of it fine. I'm never gonna be doing ab roller commercials, but I'm nice and thick, so I could sit in cold water, no problem. Life was good, so I was just kind of made for it. But it is. And then the final thing is, I think just like in sports, if you have aged out, the team's they're gonna let you know it. If you don't, you're just gonna see people going faster, quicker, and better than you, and you're not gonna be that guy. So it sort of has its own life cycle. Yeah, you're welcome. Please. Yeah.
Obviously, your team, the SEAL team, has a very intense mindset, and everyone is super ambitious and going towards a goal. When you go to civilian life, how do you transition to people not being on?
Yeah.
Options traders probably don't. Even though it's important, not as important as that, or aggressive, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. The question was, the mindset, the ability, and the intensity of the team. How do you transition from an environment like that to a less intense environment? It is tough. I remember when I left, right as I was getting ready to leave the SEAL teams, my bride, her family had a big event, and we were going to do an overseas trip. And I remember I don't even know if travel agents exist anymore, but we were using a travel agent to get that trip set. And I remember they screwed up our travel, the flights. And I remember calling this guy being like, hey, you screwed up the flights. These are the wrong days. Yeah, I know, I'm trying to fix it. And I was like, yeah, but you're a travel agent. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, well, I didn't ask you to do my taxes. I thought travel you'd be good at. And he was like scratching his head, like didn't even know what I meant. And so that's the thing I miss from the military the most is like just the level of competence of everybody in their job. And I don't just mean SEALs. I mean, if you're a radioman or a medic, you're going to be really, really good at that job. You might not be good at the 5 jobs around or next to you, but no, it's tough. I mean, I just think there's opportunities everywhere, and I just try and rate the scale of the people I'm around and how to help them get at their best. I mean, I just look. I think most people are actually trying to do their best, and if they're not, that'll bear itself out, and you're not gonna grab that person for the important need or something like that. And then the high performers, and they always will be. You know, the toughest thing I'd say for leaders in here, I was talking about this with an executive last night. We were talking about kind of managing a team, and I was talking to one of his kind of second in command. I could tell this person was just smoked, like so tired, so done. And I remember talking to the CEO being like, you know, how much do you put on, you know, Jimmy's shoulders? It's like everything. I was like, yeah, you got to adjust that. Like, because the best performers, you give them everything, and then you crush them. Now, look, you want it in their hands, but there's a level at which sometimes being the best, like, kills you. So you got to do, you know, as a leader, I think you got. I'm not asking you to say, hey, take your A performers and put them in the back of the bus, but be very aware of how you're spread loading jobs and work when it comes to your top performers, because I've seen them get beat up in a way that low performers don't. And you're like, that's not right, you know. So, yeah. We're almost there. No hands, no hands. Oh, yeah.
So once you pass, how's the training afterwards? Like
once you pass, what's the training like afterwards? Yeah. So when you finish that basic course, really you do learn most of the skills you're going to use on the battlefield. And then literally the day you graduate from the basic course, you start an advanced training program that goes another 6 months that basically repeats it with far more specificity on what the job might be coming, what you're going to need at the team, new technology, new systems, and things we're operating on, and just performing at a much, much higher level. Then you show up in an actual SEAL team. It takes you almost a year from the day you start to the day you get to a team, and you're a pretty capable person at that point, and then you'll jump into an assault team, and you'll do workups and training missions for 6-8 months, almost a year, before you'll ever see the battlefield. So you have a tremendous amount of time to kind of learn that skill set and constantly, you know, sharpen the sword as you're going through. So it's constant training. I mean, the first 10 years of your life is just training, deploying, and constantly staying sharp on all the jobs. And, you know, something happened in the water, we got to start focusing on the water. If the war is in the mountains of Afghanistan, you figure out how to run around the mountains. If it's in a desert, you work desert. And so yeah, it's just a constant evolution of what we need to learn. And then new systems come. I mean, drones weren't on the battlefield when I started. And I remember the first drone I had, I mean, we literally had this thing sent to us from like Raytheon on the battlefield. My buddies broke out the like operating manual and we used it that night. We broke it, but it totally helped us. And then we sent it back down, we're like, hey, we broke it. And they're like, cool, we'll fix this, this, and this, and just a force multiplier. So our teams are supercomputers when it comes to learning. They're always gonna try. Very rarely are our guys stubborn about new stuff. They try and figure it out, beat it up, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, we throw it out. Yeah. Please. Thank you very much for your service. You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. Do I what? You know, I travel so much, the coins go quick. I keep patches. If you got a coin or something to trade, I keep that on me. Yeah. Yep. All right. Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yep. Thank you.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.